Good morning, Mark Peterson. I'm the Director of Build for Rent at SVN SFR Hub Advisors. We're a nationwide brokerage based here in Phoenix, and the only asset class we interact with our portfolios of rental homes. And with me is Mark from Elevation.
Hi, I'm Marc Romito from Elevation Home Energy Solutions. Really, first of all, thanks for the invitation to be here. This is exciting. Very excited about the opportunities for smart energy technology to have an entrance into the SFR industry. I'm very passionate about it. As a matter of background, actually, I came from the energy industry myself. I spent about 17 years in the electric utility world, where I ran large renewable portfolios, energy efficiency, and microgrids, EVs, batteries. And I joined Elevation almost 2 years ago with the purpose of bringing solutions to the institutional space.
So now it's almost with doing the portfolios, especially with Build for Rent, a distributed energy complex throughout a metro area once it's at scale.
That's exactly right. There's a vision for this industry to work together. It's going to have to start, with a walk, run, sprint, as I would like to call it. But it needs to start with the right technologies being deployed right now. And then in aggregate over time, we can see the whole world changed because of these portfolios. So
Mark, you gave a little bit about your background. Anything else you want to elaborate on, or I can go into a little bit of mine?
I'd love to hear more about your background. You've got a lot of experience in the build and rent space, and I'd love to hear how you got to where you're at.
Sure. So starting in 05, so perfect timing for the Great Recession, I got into land brokerage, kind of the home builder side, development, building, not individual home lots here in Phoenix. And I say it was great timing because if you've ever done land brokerage for builders, it's a multi-year process. So for entitlements and all that kind of fun thing. So we work with builders and developers on both securing, acquiring, and then disposing, selling to the builders the land. And since that run up was so long, we basically ran into the wall that was the Lehman collapse. And then it became kind of a free-for-all in Phoenix on land. But so from that, it was working with the builders, working with the developers, knowing the due diligence that goes into residential development land and all of that. And then 4 years ago, actually 4 years ago in like 3 days, I've been at SVN SFR Advisors running the Build for Rent program and really working with the team to develop that out. And hopefully our goal, kind of like your goal with Elevation, is to bring it to the institutional groups. Our goal with Build for Rent has been to take it from not just a mom and pop operation, which Build for Rent, if you think about it, has been going on for 50, 75 years or more, but I've been buying a house or two, you've been buying a house or two, and it's kind of whatever the builder had, as opposed to let's look at it really kind of from a multifamily perspective. Instead of just lucking into a house that works, is let's put real institutional quality due diligence into the underwriting. Let's underwrite them somewhat similar to multifamily and really looking to drive the net operating income, especially if it's a whole self-contained portfolio of rental homes. Working with the builders to help them understand the difference of a rental home and a rental home community versus a for sale home and a for sale community. Because while if they're done right, they look shockingly similar, they are not the same house and they're not the same community. And then working with investors looking to diversify primarily out of multifamily, but we're talking to family offices, the multinational real estate private equity firms to, all right, what kind of due diligence is available? What does kind of underwriting for a build for rent community look like versus the other asset classes they're into?
Sure. And is Phoenix sort of akin to the rest of the market in the United States, or is it a microcosm? Is it an extreme example?
Well, that's interesting. So we're based in Phoenix, as I said, but we operate nationwide. So Phoenix is really, we were ground zero during the Great Recession for kind of the housing collapse. And from that also grew out the SFR industry in general. A lot of the big players today started here. And then it also is the start of Build for Rent. But whereas in Phoenix, most of the build for rent, we would classify more as horizontal apartments. So they're on one master parcel of land instead of individual tax parcels for a single family detached or townhome. Whereas in the rest of the country, it's almost all fee simple per house, per unit, whether it's a townhome or a detached house. And the demographics of the residents are really, they're quite different. Whereas the cottage style, the horizontal apartment, whatever you want to call it, is really a deconstructed apartment complex. So they're smaller 1 and 2 bedrooms. The SFR, BFR focused industry is really focused more on 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms. And the primary amenities are attached garages and yards, because they're probably boomers downsizing, moving closer into town, or they're millennials who are ready to move out of an apartment and into a house. Excuse me, and whether they own the house or not, it's with interest rates going up right now, that's a increasingly difficult hurdle to get over.
Yeah, and I imagine people love the flexibility of not being locked into a geography of certain demographics.
Yeah, well, and that's a big thing. There's a lot of pushback, especially in certain metros, that is still an outdated perception of renters. It's kind of, they're renters not by choice, that they're forced upon it. Whereas today we're seeing a significant number of the renters are renting by choice, partly for that very reason. They don't know that they're going to be in that location for 3 to 5 years. And if they're, especially an older millennial, they probably saw their parents, aunts, uncles, family, friends who got walloped during the Great Recession, and they just don't want to take on that risk. And then the other 2, 3 big drivers are pets, because if you have your own small yard, you can just open the door and let Fido run out and do his or her business.
Instead of going out the yard, right?
Exactly. And in an area like Phoenix, which for the most part is not land constrained, you can have the postage stamp backyard that's big enough for that. The other reason, as you would expect, kids, you don't want to be in necessarily a 800 square foot 2 bedroom if you have a couple of kids apartment. And then to me, a surprising reason is I grew up in the country doing all kinds of, what I hated then, but repair and maintenance on the house and the yard and stuff. A lot of people don't know how to do yard maintenance, don't know how to fix the faucet or put a new hot water heater in. So they just want to eliminate maintenance altogether.
Focus their time and effort on more important priorities, right?
Yeah, because I've replaced a few hot water heaters, and I've got to say there's more fun things to do with my afternoon. So, it's definitely an exciting time for build for rent. As I've mentioned in the past, it only took a pandemic for the rest of the industry to recognize it as a standalone asset class.
That's cool. And has the pandemic been a major driver for people wanting to work in desirable Sunbelt states? And is that part of what you're seeing in the build for rent space, or is that not at all relevant?
No, it definitely is. The work from home is definitely pushing it some. A lot of what we're seeing, though, is the pandemic didn't create new shifts. It accelerated and turbocharged shifts that were already underway. So a switch from everyone owning to a significant number of people renting, that was already starting. It hugely accelerated over the last couple of years, partly because, if I was in a 800 square foot apartment with a roommate and I didn't know where they were going, and maybe I didn't want to be exposed to people, well, the only way to remove that is to remove myself and start a new household. And if I'm going to be locked in my house, I would prefer my house to include more than a token amount of common area, let's say in the house or a small yard. So it's definitely accelerated. I think the move to the Sun Belt, I think, would have happened anyway. Like when we look to evaluate portfolios in the upper Midwest and New England and the Northeast, the tax burden is so high, and there's so little land really left to develop larger for sale communities like we see wherever you drive in Phoenix, or if you go to Dallas or Houston, those are much fewer and farther away from each other. That I think the shift was going that way, but the pandemic has been interesting. The big shift that was more unexpected was the amount of capital and interest in build for rent from kind of the very large institutional investors. You know, we went from, we could have sold a huge supply of homes and communities pre-pandemic at what to now would be outrageously high projected returns, but we had a real hard time selling them because people didn't fully understand the asset class. Whereas today, those would last about an hour before we'd make 3 phone calls and they'd be sold, because the returns are so much lower and there's so much more activity and interest in it.
It's fascinating. Is all that growth from institutional capital at the expense of commercial real estate, or in addition to?
I think it's in addition to. Some of it's being pulled out of, say, retail, but if you look at multifamily and self-storage and industrial, you know, those are booming like never before as well. And part of that is, you know, pandemic kind of forced the shift or accelerated the shift in e-commerce. You know, I'd never ordered groceries on an app and picked them up at a store before this, and I probably would never have done that. You know, I talked to a lot of people who have had everything delivered, their groceries. You know, they go on to one of the commerce apps and it's like, yep, just deliver it. I'm not even going out anymore. Even though there, you know, you can walk around Phoenix just however you want. It's the convenience is a different factor.
Yeah, it is. It is nice.
Yeah. So let's talk about, you know, what Elevation is doing. You guys are doing some wonderful and some really kind of innovative things with, from curbed all the way up or down, I guess up if you look at a house, but with solar and all of that.
Yeah.
Talk about some of that.
Let me tell you about it. I'm very excited to talk about what we're doing, and it is very innovative. So Elevation is a home energy solutions provider. So that means something, right? It's not just a word and a title. It means we have a lot of solutions, technologies that can help people save energy, right? And manage when energy is used.
Yeah.
Okay, so those technologies would include solar, energy efficiency, energy monitoring in real time, battery storage, electric vehicles. What's really important to distinguish about Elevation is we're looking holistically at energy. Any one of those technologies that I talked about could be a commodity within itself, just a product. But we need to approach energy, especially in the institutional space, strategically, right? Because it's not just a project. So what we have created is a proprietary platform, a software-based platform that allows residential consumers to see their energy consumption in real time. Like right now, what is happening in my house? What is happening in your house? That allows for people to engage with energy like they never have before. People really don't understand energy. I'm an energy nerd. Like that's my world, right? So I can go on all day long about kilowatts and kilowatt hours and who cares a watts. Most people don't even know what I'm talking about, right? They just want to know, what am I paying for? Am I doing the right thing? Could I improve? And frankly, is how can I do best for my wallet, and how can I do best for the environment? That's on people's minds. So that platform allows us to future proof for technology and include solar and energy efficiency and battery storage and electric vehicles in the right time on a strategic roadmap that allows these residents to save money, substantial dollars. And at the same time, because we're watching the performance of the appliances, our proprietary energy monitoring technology, which is called Curve, by the way, allows for the asset to be tracked in terms of how it's performing. So we get tons of data on how's the HVAC unit doing, how's the water heater performing, is the pool pump on or not. I don't know if you guys are getting into the business of building or buying houses with pools. We have lots of customers in the institutional space who own a ton of pools. And one of the things somebody may want to come in and do is turn that pool pump off. Well, what does that cost? A truck roll and a pool cleaning. So we're able to make sure that the assets are taken care of, provide that data both to the resident on a behavioral standpoint, provide the data to the operator, for an O&M, a tech-enabled O&M standpoint.
I think some of the interpretation of the very large data sets that you're looking at on being able to pre-diagnose that something's about to happen for the operator, kind of the owner, is a fascinating thing, especially on a scattered home portfolio where you don't necessarily want to send someone out 20 minutes to diagnose it, send them 40 minutes somewhere else to get the parts and then send them back. If even just 20% of the trips can be reduced on HVAC repairs or pool pump repairs, something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. The house, whether you're renting it or you buy it, is the most expensive asset you have. It's the number one, source of expenditure, and it's several times a car. In a car, think about your car. You drive it, it's got miles per gallon. It's got a check engine light, odometer. Like, the car has so much more intelligence. It's communicating to you, and our houses just sit there kind of dumb, right? And they're not saying that, you could be driving me better. Your miles per gallon is kind of off kilter. You could be saving some serious coin.
I know my car has an average miles per gallon, both. So it has instant miles per gallon and average. And if I'm going below my average, I figure, all right, I've got to change my behavior somehow, because clearly I'm doing something different than I did last month.
Yep. So there's that interesting cross section of helping people save money and helping the operators improve their operating capability. And then the third thing is we're talking about a huge environmental win.
Yeah.
In our out the gate product, which is our energy monitoring technology and solar, and sometimes energy efficiency in the retrofit space, not in the new construction because that's table stakes, but in the solar plus energy monitoring product, we're able to save residents at least 15% on their bill in an annual year or on an annual basis. At the same time, we're able to offer ancillary revenues to the operators of the portfolio because of our business model. So we're seeing environmental wins that are material, objective, not just narrative and like, hey, we did some cool thing and wrote a paragraph about it. There's numbers associated with it, real environmental benefit, real savings to the resident, and real ancillary revenue to the operator. And I think one of the biggest problems is in environmental thinking. For so long, it's been like, yeah, the planet matters, but boy, that's expensive to think about, right? Well, that day is gone. Like, we've developed a technology suite that says, yeah, the planet does matter, and institutional capital is paying attention to exactly how much that matters. And oh, by the way, it's not going to hurt you. This is going to help you. This is going to increase your NOI, right? This is going to improve the earnings on the property.
We've run analyses just at a high level using kind of minimal financial benefits on a per house basis on a new community, and this isn't even getting into your full suite of products, and it's staggering how much it can contribute to the bottom line. And we've talked a little bit directly and around ESG. Maybe we should define ESG for those who aren't as far into the weeds as you and I are.
Yeah. Thanks for backing me up a bit there. So ESG is an acronym. It stands for environmental, societal, and governance. And at a high level, from a strategic standpoint, and an executive level, ESG is about de-risking business, right? It's about making sure that strategic decisions are being made now that'll allow for the sustainable operation and success of the company. And that means that you have to have the right outlook on what's happening in the environment. Are you making the right environmental decisions? Is there environmental risk out there in a number of different ways? And doing things that's right for society, right? For example, in the institutional space, there's a lot of societal good that's happening to help people get into these kinds of awesome communities, right? And then the last is governance, where we're talking about executive compensation and diversity and fairness in employment. So all of those things are packaged into this concept that's called ESG. And so it's not some kind of just boring, bland acronym. It's something that actually helps business thrive, right? And it works with the environmental issues that are going on. It works with societal issues we're all dealing with, and it works with corporate governance. And as a part of de-risking business, it provides opportunity to improve the bottom line.
I've been reading recently with and I think they're still proposed. So if they're actually implemented, this will pertain even more. But the SEC, if someone's going to claim that they have some kind of ESG component, they want it quantified and they want it tracked. And so even if, let's say I'm a private investor, a large one, but I'm interacting with a public company, for that public company to be able to accurately report their ESG components, I have to report my components to them. And until recently, especially with some of Elevation's technology, it's been kind of, well, I know I'm saving energy for the resident, but I can't quantify how. And so I think with some of the very large, especially as you mentioned, the large operators, while they get a bad name, they're really providing a service. Not everyone wants to own a house. Some know they're not going to be in a location for 5-7 years in order to justify and kind of bulletproof making money, or at least not losing money when they go to sell. And then there's also the repair and maintenance that goes on. Large operators have an extraordinarily vested interest in that house looking good. And if they have a whole community, if they have 50, 100, 250 houses all together, all of those houses are going to look immaculate, because there's ramifications. If these 10 don't look good, the 10 that are available aren't going to lease, at least not for what they want. So if I'm remembering right, some of what Elevation can do is help an operator track some of the, let's say the at least the environmental part.
Yeah,
and
that's huge. So understanding what ESG is great. That's table stakes. Right now, it's what do you do with that? Okay,
Yeah.
How do you report on it? What's expected? A few years ago, what would be expected would be in this space is we've got low flow shower heads. We've done some Energy Star type of appliances. That's great, but it doesn't really come with data. And so the crux of ESG is about data and reporting. That's the future.
Yeah.
That's what's really important. And what we do is provide very granular data on all the energy consumption, all the energy production in the case of combining solar with the energy monitoring, and all the energy savings, whether the resident is doing things to reduce the energy footprint, whether the solar is offsetting what would otherwise come from a fossil fuel-based grid, whatever is happening in that portfolio from an energy standpoint is being not recorded, is empirically available. So when you're talking about, okay, what do you do with this ESG stuff now? Once you have the data, there is an expectation to report. And it doesn't have to be just major publics. Private equity is looking for the same thing. That institutional capital behind private equity or even the publics is saying, we want to know in report form what you're doing to help in governance, in societal issues, and in environment. So we're able to provide for the first time very real data, that benchmark data, performance data, improvement data, so that the institutions can say, here, this is what we've done. This is what we've accomplished. And that can be translated to, typically in the residential sector, it's going to be GRESB, GRESB is going to be the reporting entity. That's going to be the accountability for the institutional players.
You mean I'm going to be held accountable for things I'm saying?
Yeah. We'll be accountable to see this data, do good for the planet. But at the same time, like I said, it's a huge opportunity, because look, whatever is being saved is saving money for the resident. And so while we're working to report this for the analyst that's looking to measure the performance of the institution, what's the second highest bill besides rent that somebody's going to pay? Right? It's their energy bill.
Especially in Phoenix or Dallas in the summertime.
Yeah, my gosh, it's ridiculous. And it's getting higher and higher and higher. And that's trending up. So whatever we collectively can do to help reduce the energy costs for renters and residents is really good for the industry and for the renters, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a very real and material bill to have to pay. And things aren't getting any cheaper. So putting downward pressure on energy costs is very, very important.
And I think finding the ability to monitor in real time to find phantom loads, or what at least for me would be a phantom load, that say something's kicking on at 2 a.m, or it's maintaining a steady draw and I can't figure out what it is. This would really, as a resident, help me figure out. It's like, all right, it's here.
Yeah,
I can start to figure that out.
Yeah, and tying back to the societal part of ESG, that engagement, that education, it doesn't come from anywhere else. There's nobody who's going to tell you, hey, if you're running the space heater, or you're running the air purifier, or you're doing something that's, you don't know how much money you're spending. You don't know what the impact that is, right? People are blind to it. So giving that engagement to residents is a societal benefit, and it's actually an objective societal benefit in the ESG realm, and it's really important. And it can be, in terms of energy savings, it could be in terms of using the solar that we're putting on people's houses. But it's also really important for people to see, like, what's going on in my house? Did I leave my oven on for too long? One of the funny things that happened with me is we've got this technology installed in my home, and my wife went out and saw that my pool pump had sucked up some pine cones from a big giant pine tree in my backyard. And she didn't want the motor to burn out, so she turned the pump off. And I wouldn't have known. I just wouldn't have known. It would have gone, I'm at work and doing my thing, and I'm looking at the report. We've got a really cool app that allows residents and people to see this. And so, I was able to say, oh my gosh, my pool pump's not running, which, obviously kept the thing from turning green and for me having an expensive and miserable weekend.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, about how some of your technology can be integrated and what Elevation can do on a prospective to be built for rent community. But I think equally important, and maybe more so, is retrofitting an existing portfolio, a portfolio of existing houses.
Sure. So what we focus on is, first and foremost, the energy monitoring platform. That data is absolutely critical. It's very strategic. We don't want anybody, whether it's build for rent or it's retrofit, institutional retrofits, to get pigeonholed by a commodity project, right? So we're looking to deploy energy monitoring in combination with solar in the build for rent space. That will enable the next technologies to come into play. So we're not just talking about doing solar. We're talking about, okay, we're doing solar now. That's available and it's necessary and it's useful. But what's next? Next is electric vehicles, right? Right now, people aren't losing rent because somebody can't charge their car, but that's happening.
Well, I think resident expectations of a baseline is going forward is extremely important. Of
Absolutely.
Kind of the environmental and energy savings that they can, as an operator, I might be looking at it as, can I drive more money? But if I can't get a resident in there, it's all for
That's right.
nothing.
That's right. So being able to see that now, people don't realize an electric vehicle is usually about the same amount of electric load as a home, right? So this being able to see that, to know when it's charging, when it's not, to maximize that from a bill standpoint is huge, right?
Yeah.
So we start with the energy monitoring. We put the solar on with it where it applies. And then we're future proofing for the next thing, which is electric vehicles. So we want to see those vehicles either being charged by the sun or being charged outside of very expensive time of use windows. And then we'll be talking about battery storage, et cetera. Now that applies to build for rent now. And we're doing a lot of activity in the build to rent space. And in the retrofit market, it's really interesting because when you're building something from scratch, you should expect the builder to be shooting for an efficient footprint, right? That's why we're adding the monitoring and the solar, right? To improve on that existing footprint, basically take these houses typically to net zero. In the retrofit space, and especially in dispersed retrofits, that's inventory that's typically 15 to 1 years old. And there's not a lot of information out there about the health of the appliances, the nameplate on these things.
If there's something other than newspaper in the walls for insulation. We had one portfolio as an extreme example, and the average vintage was like 1895.
Oh, dear.
So, so the Elevation could probably do wonders for the efficiencies of that portfolio.
And that really emphasizes the importance of the energy monitoring platform. So we have a device, it goes in the breaker panel itself, and then that feeds data up under the cloud. And we actually monitor every single breaker. But imagine the scenario where someone bought a portfolio of retrofit homes and they didn't think about the electric panel other than maybe did it pass some sort of inspection or not, right? Is it safe? Is it labeled correctly? Is it ready for solar? Is it ready for EVs? Those kinds of things they show themselves almost like an inventory, going back in time to re-inventory your portfolio to prepare for asset health and to future ready that home. In the event, when it comes time that portfolio operators need to deploy what's called level 2 charging, or vehicle charging into the garages, it's basically a dryer outlet, right? It's a 240 outlet, and that needs a dedicated breaker. Is that even there, right?
And is there space on the panel to even add it?
On the panel, and so then it starts this whole strategy of, okay, we need to know what we have. We need to right now deploy the monitoring. That's good for the resident. It's good for us as the operator, speaking,
Yep.
And that allows us to get that data to report on our ESG performance, which will improve over time. We're going to add solar wherever we possibly can, because we're going to recognize the ancillary revenue opportunity that elevation can provide, and give the resident this ginormous saving on their bill. And oh, by the way, if we were just talking about solar as a commodity, there's no way to demonstrate that residents are actually saved. They wouldn't know, right? And in the industry, I think average turn time is every 3 years, ballpark.
Yeah, for SFRs, it's probably in about that. For build for rent, it's somewhere between, the average that we've seen is about 5.5 years, 3.5 for millennials, 8.5 plus for boomers, and a significant majority of boomers don't want to ever move again. So it's kind of there will be some forced event that kicks them out of the house.
Understood. So whatever that event is that causes a turn in a home, if there's no ability for the new resident to see what's happening with their energy and their solar production, they're blind. They wouldn't know so what we're doing is we're creating a new experience every single time, which is very differentiated from the story getting lost. Somebody way back in the day, the solar is put on the house. We don't really know what it's doing. What we're able to do is, because we're monitoring the consumption of what you and I are doing in our homes in real time, we can provide tips, tricks, notifications, whatever, and tell people, this is how you're using your solar. You're on track to save what we expect you to save, or here's how you might want to modify your behavior in order to be able to maximize your savings. So it's this dialogue with residents that enhances engagement and enhances the relationship with the portfolio operator and the resident, and it gives them a sense of ownership and control over something that is the most underserved. Renters are the most underserved class of people in this country when it comes to smart technology and energy technology. And because you guys have portfolios, that day has changed. You can bring them something nobody else can.
And we can, the big operators can do it, like you're saying, en masse of, the biggest operators have 20,000 houses or more. Of once that starts getting deployed, sure, it's still a small percentage compared to the entire housing stock, but it's significant swaths that are going and acquiring the technology.
Yep, and I'm glad you talked about the swaths, because we're talking about nationwide portfolios. Yeah, as we're seeing, most of the growth is in the Sun Belt states in the SFR space. That's typically solar friendly, right? You're thinking that the Southwest, Texas, the parts of Florida, wherever it's sunny is generally good for solar. But the awesome thing is, because of our platform-based approach, that energy monitoring device and software platform applies all over the entire country. Even if it's a pocket of the country that's not amiable to solar, you can still deploy energy monitoring, which is important not only for the capability for ESG, but in terms of brand. Like if you're running a portfolio of homes, there are many who will be solar ready and some that won't. Maybe that's because of a part of the country. Maybe it's because of a specific electric utility. Maybe it's because that house just, good roof faces north or something like that. But every house in the portfolio can have the Curve platform.
Yeah.
Which means you can get a consistent energy management brand across your entire fleet. So people have the same or similar kind of experience.
And we know of some operators who are heavily focused on health and wellness. So this clearly would tie in with that. And we know other operators who, when they're leasing up a house, they work to design particular smells and scents. So, like the old adage of selling a house of baking cookies during it so it smells more inviting, they go all the way to that. And so I think the notion and the idea of being able to brand it and know it's like, all right, I live in Houston now, but I'm going to move to Dallas or San Antonio. I'll just pick up another one of their houses because I liked how that one works so much, and it'll be a consistent strain. Are there markets, outside of the Curbed app and being able to select the right energy program if the energy provider has time of day versus consistent pricing through the day, different programs, are there markets that, if we go the full suite, let's say the solar on down, that it really doesn't work or it really does work?
Let's focus.
Even if that's phrased wrong.
I think where it does work is let's start with the common sense. Solar as a technology needs the sunlight. So we're talking about sunny states in general. So we're thinking California, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Carolinas, those types of Sunbelt states
that coincidentally
go
along with portfolios,
sunny, right? Happen to be along with portfolios. It's people apparently like to live in sunny states, right? Like who'd have thunk it?
Low tax sunny states with reasonable regulations.
Yeah.
What a concept,
right? What a concept. So we see typically those states as solar friendly, and then there's a matter of utility friendliness towards technology. There's been some contention in the country or across different regions of not wanting to subsidize solar, which is very important to us at Elevation. That's why we look at energy holistically. That's why we look at energy efficiency. That's why we look at energy monitoring. There's a behavioral component that's really important, because solar on its own, it doesn't perform well. Solar coupled with other technologies, energy monitoring, for example, allows people to consume what they're producing in the best possible way, and to trick out their thermostat. Very simply, we can help a smart thermostat actually be smart. Like you want to do some cool stuff, we can save people like $30-$40 a month during the summer just by telling that thermostat exactly when to run and not to run, or helping people to know how to program it on a very simple algorithm. So that helps us to land more efficient solar into some of these regions that would be less amiable, starting with the sun, then going to the utility jurisdiction. And then it becomes a market specific, house specific thing. Like I said, every home in the country is ready for a curb in a software platform, and probably around, I'd say ballpark 40% of a national portfolio is ready for solar.
40% is actually higher than I would have guessed. So for me, that's good news. I'm going to throw kind of a curveball at you of, like, I would love to take a house that I live in off grid at some day. How close do you think kind of mass battery storage on a per house? Assuming I don't want to be way out on the cutting edge and spend 75 grand and have a 30-year payout on it.
Yeah. So let me, interestingly, I spent almost 20 years in the electric utility industry. And I'll make the point that people really don't know this, but they don't really want to go off the grid. Unless you're someone who wants to get a cabin in rural Montana or way up in the White Mountains in Arizona or deep in the swamp someplace, and you really want to be removed and isolated, that's important to you, that is possible. So you can get battery banks and you can get some solar, but just thinking about what you really want to have in your life. Do you want to give up air conditioning? Do you want to give up?
Preferably not,
Right.
not in Phoenix.
Right. So we do need the electric grid. And that's important to us at Elevation, is we don't see ourselves or position ourselves as people getting away from the grid. We see ourselves as an enhancement to the grid. And in fact, by investing in these technologies that Elevation offers, because you all are portfolio investors, there's strategic opportunity, if we follow the strategic roadmap we lay out, to actually work with utilities to augment and replace natural gas peaking plants that utilities are going to have to build to keep the lights on. So I would say, to go back to your question, is I focus people on working with their utility provider, helping people save as much money as they possibly can, and investing in the right technologies that in number can actually bring what's called virtual power plant capability. And we've piloted some of that work at Elevation as well, actually in the Phoenix metro area. And we're actively engaged in trying to help the SFR institutions to see that strategic path.
Then maybe, so for the better part of 20 years, I lived in various parts of Maine, a number of them in coastal Maine, where we would get periodic ice storms. And so I remember I was studying for the bar exam and I didn't have power for a week in January. Being in Maine in the winter without electricity, so no heat, no running water, all that, while studying for the bar exam was an interesting adventure. So maybe it's more as a backup supply as opposed to instead of a generator.
That's a great way to look at it. I think, you know, batteries are a great technology. We do a lot of battery deployment. I think time will help the cost come down, as will utilities putting out more and more of these time of use rate plans. It's going to get really expensive to operate electric appliances in the winter in cold climates, and really expensive to operate them in the summer in hot climates. So both from a grid arbitrage, a dollar savings algorithm, batteries will come into play. But most importantly right now, it's really what you're suggesting is, do you have a real reason to be concerned about a couple hour outage like we saw what happened in Texas in the winter, and we see it happens in California sometimes in the summer. In that what we call resiliency context, batteries are quite useful. So in the institutional space, if and when a region that you're investing in starts to suffer grid outage for whatever reason, that can be incredibly costly for an operator. And in that event, we would absolutely recommend, let's look at batteries. But batteries need a brain. And so that takes you back to the importance of the curb platform is, even if you have a battery, you need, it needs to be able to know what to back up. Because it's just thinking there's a house, right? But what do you really need? What's that we call a critical load? What's the critical load that you need to back up in order to ride through that storm? So you didn't have to study for the bar. What did you really need? You had a blanket.
I was wedged between a kerosene heater and a fireplace, and trying to keep the house from freezing. So so I think we're kind of running out of time here. Not that we couldn't keep on talking the rest of the afternoon, but is there anything that would be good that we haven't talked about that you figure, all right, I really want to get this point out?
I really want to reemphasize the importance of being strategic for institutional operators when it comes to energy technology. There's a reason why we have made such an investment in energy monitoring as the prerequisite, real-time energy monitoring as a prerequisite for other technologies. We don't want to see portfolio operators get pigeonholed or their residents get pigeonholed by one project. There needs to be a forward-thinking mentality of solar now, energy monitoring now, but let's invest in the EVs and the batteries as time goes on, and then we can participate in time into this aggregated portfolio of power production.
And I think that goes, when I talk on different panels, one of my kind of parting thoughts is always, if you're new to the investment class, and it would pertain to any real estate, is put a team together of experts in, like, we know underwriting built for rent's probably better than most people. And then there's property managers who know that part better, and lenders. And now another component is the energy technology that, especially for the larger operators, I don't have 20 years to get in far into the weeds as you have, let alone the 20 years all your team members have of, I'll just come talk to you.
Okay. And that strategic roadmap is critical.
All right. Well, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, great.
It's been a great conversation.
It's been fun talking to you, and I appreciate the invite, and happy to do this again.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.